Why, hello there, beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back. Today we're not going to talk about anything that's been trending, anything on the news or stuff like that. We're just going to sit back and have a rather loose discussion on multiculturalism. Now, there's really no news currently that's based around multiculturalism. It's just something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while. Well, it's not a holistic discussion on multiculturalism. It's just my first exposure to multiculturalism. And I just wanted to share this with you guys. Now, first of all, welcome to all the new people that's been subscribed to the content on BitChute, some new people watching on Instagram. Glad you guys came along. Now, let's dive right into it. Now, for some of the newer folks who don't know me, I was born and raised in this particular part of the world, a small country in Southeast Asia by the name of Bangladesh. Now, I'm going to tell you some useless trivia about Bangladesh, but it's going to tie into the video later on. So Bangladesh is a small country in Southeast Asia, and when I say small, I'm only referring to it as small geographically. Geographically, we're a small country. For people in North America, if you want to get some perspective, it is comparable to the state of Mississippi, if that helps. However, population-wise, it is massive. It had a population of 170 million people. The reason why I use the past tense is because the last population census was several years ago. Our government actually stopped doing population census, and there are certain reasons for why they did it. So the population of the country is at least 170 million people. That is 5 to 6 years from now. We don't know what the exact number is. We are one of the most densely populated countries in the world. We have more people living in the small country of Bangladesh than there are in Russia. That's an actual thing. You guys can look it up. Now, why is that important? It's also a poor country. There is a lack of opportunities. There's a lot of things that people cannot do. So a huge number of people leave Bangladesh and go to other parts of the world for opportunities. Now, a considerable chunk of those people go to the Middle East. Manpower export is one of our principal exports, believe it or not. It's not the main thing, but it is one of our principal exports. And then you have a huge chunk of people that go to Europe, that go to North America, that go to East Asia. It's scattered all over the world. It's massive population. Wherever you go in the world, you can find at least one community. It might be very small, it might be very big, that consists entirely of Bangladeshi individuals. And so the United States is no exception. I came to the United States from here to all the way over there in September, well no, it's not September, towards the end of August in 2014. And one of my first stops was New York City. And it is in New York City that I saw multiculturalism for the first time. And it's weird. For people that grew up in the United States, maybe you guys are used to seeing something like this. But this was very bizarre to me, and it was bizarre for a whole set of reasons. This multicultural experiment seemed to be at its strongest, if we can use that word, at least from my perspective, in a part of New York City called Jackson Heights. And those are the images that you guys are seeing on the background. This is Jackson Heights. It's virtually 100% Bangladeshi people. The street signs, the signs that you see being written in foreign characters and letters, those characters are my native language. Our native language is Bangla. We do not have a very big English-speaking population. English has certain roots. We do use English for official business because it used to be a British colony once upon a time. But the vast majority of the population does not speak English. Anyways, so going back to the whole multiculturalism thing. So I'm in Jackson Heights, right? And everybody looks like me, everybody talks like me, everybody's from my particular part of the country. Now, there are certain things with this multiculturalism thing, granted this was my first exposure to it, that I thought was really weird. And the four main categories of weirdness that I could associate with multiculturalism, I will refer to as the language, the business, and the culture, and the level of integration that I saw in Jackson Heights. So first let's talk about the language. The people there, a significant chunk of the people living there, do not speak English. And when I say do not speak English, I don't mean they do not speak English comfortably. I mean they do not speak English. Period. Some of them have been living in the United States for decades, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in certain cases, but they don't speak a word of English. Now you guys might be wondering, how is this possible? Well, that was my first question too. Let me fill you in. The United States does this really bizarre thing, and I say bizarre because I honestly cannot explain this. They do this thing called diversity visas. For people who don't know what a diversity visa is, let me explain to you. Let's say you live outside of the United States. Let's say you live in Kenya. Every year you can go to the the United States Embassy in Kenya, fill up a form with your name, with your family name, and provide some government photo identification. They will put your name in some bowl, and after a certain period of time, several thousands of random names will be drawn out of that bowl. And if your name happens to be a lucky name, you just got lucky in that particular instance, you get to come to the United States. You're on a fast track, you're immediately granted a green card, and you're on a fast track pathway to citizenship. I am not exaggerating. That's it. That's about it. Every year, for a certain number of years, a huge pool of people can get to come to the United States, get immediate green card, simply because they were lucky. A huge number of people from Bangladesh came to the United States through this absurd thing called diversity visas. A lot of people from other parts of the world also came. Now, this diversity visa has a certain quota. Once a particular country fills up its quota, then that process stops. So for Bangladesh, that process stopped. I think it stopped in 2015 or 2013, sometime around that. Anyways, so if you're wondering why is it that these people cannot speak a word of English, well, that's because them coming to the United States had nothing to do with their level of education, had nothing to do with what skills they have, had nothing to do with whether they can contribute to society. A huge chunk of people came simply because they got lucky. And once you get to come in because you get lucky, you get to pull in your whole family. That is the issue of chain migration. So I met a huge number of people who does not speak a word of English. That was bizarre to me. It was really insane for me to think, because I've never seen this before, right? I couldn't possibly imagine a group of people living in a country for several decades that doesn't speak their language. Now, what immediately stems from this language is the culture. These people, since they don't speak the language, at least not in any comfortable sense, they can never be a part of the culture. Most of the cultural things happening in the United States leaves them behind, and why shouldn't they? They can't take part of it. They're not interested in American politics per se. They're not interested in American movies, American culture, American entertainment. Nothing. They're entirely isolated. They're only living here physically, but mentally they're somewhere else. I've met a ton of people who couldn't even name the senators that represent them. They simply don't care. Now, these people predominantly vote Democrat. As a matter of fact, if they vote, they 100% vote Democrat. But that's not entirely surprising. From their point of view, the other side of the aisle is just evil. Now, they've been told that they were evil, and obviously there is a bit of a cultural barrier alongside the language barrier. So they generally believe the television station, the news station that is running in every American airport. There's no reason for these people to think that they're lying, or they're being lied to. So they're not in any way part of the American culture, and chances are they won't be. And they raise their kids in really isolated form. A lot of these folks that live in Jackson Heights, their families don't interact with any other group of people living in the United States along racial lines or along lines of nationality. I've met families who said, we don't interact with Americans because we don't have to. And in many ways, they're true. They live in that neighborhood. They work in their neighborhood, and very few of them leave. At least the ones that I'm referring to. So the culture was messed up. And now let's talk about the business side of things. These guys are incredibly entrepreneurial. I mean, if you're a libertarian like me, you see a lot of good things. You almost have to be. When you come to a country, you don't speak language, you are barely employable, you have no real world skills. You either resort to crime, or you start a business, or you find a way to sell something. Otherwise, you're not surviving. These people are incredibly entrepreneurial. I kind of like that. And for people who are pro-business, you guys would like that if you go to those places. That being said, their business practices are a little sketchy. Let me explain to you what I mean. A lot of these people love causes like Fight for 15, minimum wage, give workers their due, and stuff like that. When I say they like causes like these, I mean they vote for politicians that seem to embody causes like these. However, as far as their own businesses are concerned, no such standards apply. People work in their businesses for $3, $4, $5, $6 an hour, maybe even less. Let me explain. These businesses do not hire people who are American citizens. Yeah, it's sad. But you see those restaurants? You see those shops in the images? They hire specifically people that are international students, or better yet, people that are international students from Bangladesh, or people that are in the United States illegally that happen to be mostly from Bangladesh. Why? So they can pay them a fraction of what they should pay them. People working in these restaurants make $4, $5, $6 an hour, and they gotta deal with it. What can they do? Complain? No, I don't think so. And generally, when you create an environment like this is bound to happen. What I also thought particularly puzzling is that as I was speaking to people, none of this is a secret. The police people, the lawyers, they know exactly this is happening. But it's one of those things that people just let it fester. I don't exactly know why the left-leaning worker rights people are okay with it, but they are okay with it. And this brings us to perhaps the most depressing side of multiculturalism that I've seen. A total lack of integration. We have people in this particular area that have lived in the United States for 25 years, 30 years, maybe even more. They are, for all intents and purposes, as far as official paperwork is concerned, American citizens. Nobody can prove otherwise. But they are not American. And that's not me calling them. That's what they describe themselves to be. They describe themselves as Bangladeshi. They have an American passport. They part of the American political process. They're not particularly informed about it, but they're a part of it. They take benefits of the American system, whether that be through taxes or government services or welfare. But they don't consider themselves to be American. And from their point of view, why should they? They don't speak the same language. They're not part of the culture. And to be honest, Bangladesh is a vast majority, it's a Muslim majority country. So they have a lot of complaints about Western culture. And so they think of themselves as Bangladeshi. And that was a bizarre introduction to multiculturalism for me, because I couldn't possibly understand how this is going to help the United States. How does this help the long-term stability of a country? Now, the images that you guys are seeing in the background, that's just Jackson Heights. I'm just using this as an example. I saw neighborhoods like this in Atlanta, in Austin, in Chicago. And that's just the Bangladeshi contingent. And then there are other contingents from other parts of the world. I don't know if you guys have heard of Little Mogadishu in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have seen that place up close, and that's just the Jackson Heights equivalent of Somalia. There is a Jackson Heights equivalent of people of Indian origin. There's a Jackson Heights equivalent of people of Nigerian origin, and so on. Now, I would imagine that whatever it is that I've noticed from my people probably fostered in those areas as well. I don't know. But I think that's a reasonable speculation. Now, don't get me wrong, I totally understand the whole diversity thing. I went to Chinatown in New York. Those people, they consider themselves, at least that's the impression that I got. Those people consider themselves to be American, at least from my interaction with them. They want to showcase the culture of their ancestors, but they consider themselves and their kids to be American. They consider their kids to be part of the American system. They're interested in politics. Their kids are interested in the culture. A total contradiction of what I saw in Jackson Heights. So I don't want to make the claim that every immigrant-dominated neighborhood is anti-American. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I am trying to say is there are certain neighborhoods, certain populace within the United States that are, for all intents and purposes, legally speaking, members of the United States. However, in their minds, they're not. Does that bode well for the United States? I don't know. I'm not a social scientist. I'm no expert. You guys let me know. I will talk to you guys later. Take care.